Greetings, it's a Timeshare Traveler. Today is episode 321. A little bit out of order, I've been working on this one a while. Is how fast are costs rising for timeshare maintenance, which is the base cost once you've purchased. So first thing I want to do is talk about what inflation has been, short-term rentals, and then hotel prices, what they expected based on searches I've done in Google. So I want to set the stage for what people are saying as far as the base inflation. And then I want to compare it to timeshare maintenance, and since I own both WorldMark, Marriott, and Hilton, I have a good cross-section of the industry, so I'll take a look at that. And then I've got some takeaways, sort of my thoughts, and then lastly, other concerns that I have with regards to inflation and the rising costs that people often talk about with regards to timeshare maintenance. Without further ado, let me jump into that. Again, at the end, I'll be talking a little bit about my channel. Okay, let's first talk about the inflation, short-term rentals, and hotel prices. So U.S. inflation for 2025 is about 3%, maybe a little bit over, a little bit under. It's hard to, it's kind of a moving target since we're not done with it yet. It's hard to say. Social Security, the increase has been approved. It's at 2.8%. That tends to be always a little bit below inflation, just the way they do the metric. There's a big debate about that, but that's just the reality of life. So that's a good number, 2.8%. To compare that, many retirees are the ones that own timeshares or use timeshares more. The other thing is large city tourist hotel inflation is about 4%, and I think that's kind of where you see the largest increase. Again, it's similar to tourist destinations. The large cities, often the large cities are the tourist destinations, and that's somewhat in line with timeshares, and I'll get into that in greater detail. The general hotel inflation is actually lower. They're expecting 1 to 2% in 2026. So I think that's more the, kind of on the highway, those kind of places. We're not going to see as much. They're more like the stopover places. I think that's driven more by the economy is not growing that fast, so the inflation in there is lower. Here's the one that surprised me. I was doing some other checking. Is Airbnb has just changed their fees for hosting, and now it's host-only fees, and that's going to go up by 15%. So the belief is that the most likely prices will increase by 15% to do Airbnb. And that will just cover their costs and not increase profits. So it's unclear if that's how that's going to work, whether they'll absorb some of it and pass it on in the second year, or whether they're going to raise it. But it's going to put quite a bit of pressure on those people who have Airbnbs, and it's going to make the difference between an Airbnb and a timeshare and a hotel, that they're starting to diminish the differences. So that's kind of the overall inflation. Now I want to go through the timeshares, what I've seen on my end. Okay, let's look at what we're seeing for 2026 over 2025, what the planned. So I just looked at what my maintenance payments were. So Marriott Vacation Club increased less than $100, but that's 3.8%, just based on the number of points that I have. And Vistana was a little bit higher at 4.1%. So when I look at my overall Marriott, it's because it's pretty evenly split. It's at a little bit under 4%. So very similar to the hotel prices in large cities. Hilton, my collection, which is very minimal part of my increase by 4.3%. But the deeds, they do vary based on what I happen to own, but mine were at 3.8% for me. And again, so that based on the number of points I have, that means my increase is less than the 4% overall, since I only have maybe 5% in collection. So that, again, puts me at or below what we're seeing in the big city hotels. WorldMark increased by 5%, and that's their maximum they can do. And that's somewhat a catch-up. For the couple of years ago, there was a giant inflation, and WorldMark was limited to 5%. They did a special assessment, but that really only brought it up to like 6 or 7%, and inflation that year was like 9 or 10%, at least as far as Social Security goes and stuff like that. So it seems to be that we're seeing maintenance fees, and again, I looked at the year before, It was a similar increase, and inflation was similar. So this seems to be a reasonable facsimile for how timeshares work. So with that, maybe let's now talk about sort of the implications of all that. So the first thing is the hype around cost increases. In my mind, there seems to be a lot of social media saying it's horrible and stuff like that, but it feels a little bit more than inflation. So I would love to have it be just the cost increase with inflation, but it's about 1% more than that, somewhere a little bit less than that, a little bit more, less than 1% more. So over time, I guess that means it will have an impact. But it is in line, I think, with inflation. Is driving this, and it's in line with hotels. So the price of hotels, I think, is similar. I think a lot of the increases are still COVID driven. A lot of the different cleaning is a little more intense than I think it was probably 3-4 years ago, and I think all of those costs continue. I will say this: I have two. I'm a real estate investor, and I have 2 condos. I'm seeing a much higher increase in HOAs than I'm seeing in my maintenance fees for my timeshares. So I'm seeing much more than a 4% increase in the HOAs, and that some driven by law and some various other things. So whatever timeshares are doing compared to condos and HOAs, it seems to be a lower inflation. And then I want to talk again about the Airbnb. The increase in fees with Airbnb deals with Wall Street and revenue increases. I think Airbnb is under pressure to increase its revenues, and the way they're doing it is restructuring their prices. And again, it feels like timeshare are more competitive compared to Airbnb. Here's what I noticed. I do a lot of travel, obviously, and so I was talking to Lyft and Uber drivers when I was in Las Vegas because I didn't have a car, so I was using that. And Lyft and Uber have reduced the percentage that they pay their drivers. So it's almost like the cost now, if you call a taxi there, which are hard to find, it's actually cheaper or similar to Lyft and Uber. So this big, giant savings that we saw initially with Uber and Lyft is kind of gone. It's back to the same what a taxi would be. And I think I'm seeing the same thing with Airbnb. There may have been initial, rush to lower costs, but I think it's increasing in all the same price pressures that make a hotel. In fact, I'm not even sure over time if it's not going to be, there's no economy of scale for an Airbnb owner unless you own an apartment complex, and most Airbnbs are single family homes. So I think there's not an economy of scale that you would timeshares and other things. So I think we're going to see greater increases over the next few years with all the homes and all those things that there's going to be, the increase is going to be there, managing the turnover, new renters and stuff like that. All of those costs are going to get absorbed in that. And with higher interest rates on homes, new properties coming into Airbnb are much more expensive than ones that were done during the COVID. So I think there's a lot of increases we're going to see in that. So anyway, so it feels like again, it is a little bit over inflation. It would be great if it was right at inflation, but the increases are tracking somewhat in like 1% over inflation. So it is a little bit high, but it's not ridiculous like I hear in a lot of the get out of your timeshare ads type stuff. My last area is the other concerns. And again, I start to worry about other ways that costs are being reduced and what that impacts me. So I worry about service reductions. Will the cleaning not be quite as good? The one that's bothering me the most lately is there used to be very few places where you paid parking fees, and that seems to be starting to happen more and more. Again, it's just raising the cost of staying there, or resort fees and other things like that. And hotels have been doing that for a while. The other thing is I'm seeing increases in costs for free stays in terms of number of points. And most recently, Wyndham in October switched their Wyndham Rewards. It used to be 15,000 points per night per bedroom. Now it's up to 30, which that's doubling of free stay. So that really makes that program much less interesting. But Hilton and Marriott have done where their points cost more for hotels and so forth. And that's just a reflection of that they have a number of points that are out there for all of their customers, and so that's what they have to store that in their book as a liability. The other thing that's starting to happen is there's some timeshares that are actually closing. Wyndham is quietly closing a few in the Pigeon Forge area and so forth. And I do worry about whether Hilton will do something similar with the recent purchase of Blue Green and Diamond International. Will they have redundancy, or will they look at which units are profitable and so forth, and will we see some consolidation or reduction of locations? So anyway, those are my other concerns in the timeshare industry as far as inflation and cost increases go. Hope you liked the video. Don't forget to give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. And now I'll tell you a little bit about my channel. Hi, this is Cliff, and I'm the Timeshare Traveler. Welcome to my channel. The purpose of my channel is to educate those who love traveling in timeshares. I've been an owner for 15 plus years at timeshare ownership. I have elite ownership with Marriott, Hilton, and Worldmark. I have published over 100 timeshare video reviews, and I've published over 95 timeshare tips. I can be found on Facebook at Timeshare Trav, at Twitter Timeshare Trav, and on the web at www.timesharetraveler.com.